Researchers from Harvard spent 2 decades tracking over 89,000 people. And what they found is something most physicians will never bring up during your annual checkup. Your blood type, that single letter on a card you filled out years ago and probably never thought about again, is one of the most precise biological maps your body carries. Not for transfusions, for longevity, for understanding exactly which risks are quietly building inside you right now and what to do about each one before they become a crisis. Here is what makes this genuinely urgent. A large meta-analysis published in Arteriosclerosis, Thrombosis, and Vascular Biology, covering data from over 1.5 million participants, confirmed that blood type is an independent predictor of cardiovascular mortality. Independent, meaning regardless of your weight, your cholesterol, your diet, your blood type carries its own biological risk signature. Most people are sitting on this information completely unused. In the next 15 minutes, I'm going to walk you through each blood type, O, A, B, and AB, giving you the exact science behind each one's strengths and vulnerabilities, and the protocol that matches your specific biological blueprint. And toward the end, I will tell you the one factor that determines whether any of this actually protects you or just becomes information you watched once and forgot. I've spent many years working with patients on exactly this. And what I keep seeing is the same gap. People following generic health advice written for a statistical average that does not actually exist. Your neighbor is type O, you might be type A. The protocol that protects him could be entirely wrong for you. Nobody is telling you this. Let me fix that. Before we go further, drop a comment right now with just your blood type. Just the letter O, A, B, or AB. I want to see who is watching this because what I'm about to share applies in very different directions depending on which type you carry. And if you've ever been told your blood work looks normal, but you still deal with unexplained fatigue, persistent joint stiffness, or brain fog that comes and goes, add the word SIGA now to your comment. Those symptoms mean something specific depending on your blood type, and I will explain exactly why. Here is what happens in a typical annual checkup. A 58-year-old man comes in, cholesterol slightly elevated but manageable, blood pressure borderline but not alarming. The doctor sees everything sits just inside the acceptable range and sends him home with a note to watch his diet. And come back in a year. Nobody checks his blood type for anything beyond transfusion records. Nobody connects his type A profile to his chronically elevated cortisol. Nobody explains that for his specific biology, that borderline blood pressure number carries a meaningfully different risk than it does for his type O colleague sitting in the waiting room. 6 years later, he is in a specialist's office after a cardiac event that his annual checkup showed no warning signs for. This scenario plays out thousands of times every single day. The research showing why blood type matters for individual risk management has been available in major peer-reviewed journals for over a decade. Most patients have never heard a word of it. That gap between what the evidence shows and what happens in everyday medical offices is exactly what this conversation is here to close. Now, if you are someone who values understanding the why behind the numbers, not just being told what to do, then what I am about to explain is going to give you a completely different framework. Your blood type is determined by antigens, specific protein structures on the surface of your red blood cells. These antigens are not passive labels. They actively interact with your immune system, your clotting factors, your hormonal environment, and how pathogens either attach to or slide off your cells. 3 mechanisms matter most as you age. First, coagulation activity. Different blood types carry measurably different levels of von Willebrand factor, the clotting protein that determines how readily your blood thickens and adheres to vessel walls. Think of it like the viscosity of oil running through an engine. The wrong thickness and the engine either seizes or leaks. Second, cortisol baseline. Blood type antigens influence the sensitivity of the hormonal circuit governing your stress response. Type A individuals run measurably higher baseline cortisol than type O. Over decades, that difference accumulates into a meaningful health gap. Third, pathogen adhesion. Certain bacteria bind to specific blood type antigens more easily than others. Your blood type literally determines which infections are most likely to colonize silently and which ones your immune system handles efficiently. These are not small differences. They are fundamental biological variations that demand different prevention strategies, and yet standard advice treats everybody as if it were the same engine running the same fuel. Blood type O, the oldest genetic blueprint on the planet, and the one with the strongest built-in cardiovascular protection. Type O blood contains the lowest levels of von Willebrand factor of any blood type. Less clotting activity means blood flows more freely through your vessels, the pipes stay open, pressure stays manageable, and the risk of blockage stays consistently lower. The Harvard analysis of the Nurses' Health Health study and health professionals follow-up study, tracking over 89,000 Americans, found that type O individuals carry a 23% lower risk of heart disease compared to type AB. A separate European cohort study of over 400,000 participants found that non-O blood types carry a 56% higher risk of venous thromboembolism compared to type O. That is structural cardiovascular protection built into your biology at birth, but type O carries a vulnerability almost nobody talks about, and you need to hear this clearly. Your stomach, the bacterium Helicobacter pylori, the primary cause of gastric ulcers, chronic gastritis, and a significant contributor to stomach cancer risk, attaches far more easily to type O stomach lining than to any other blood type. The surface receptors on type O gastric cells carry a specific configuration that H. pylori binds to with greater efficiency. Think of it like a lock and key. Type O cells are carrying the lock that H. pylori's surface proteins were shaped to fit. Other blood types have a slightly different lock, harder to pick. Research published in the journal Gut confirmed that type O individuals are statistically more susceptible to H. pylori colonization and recover more slowly from gastrointestinal infection. H. pylori does not announce itself. It colonizes silently, eroding the stomach's protective mucus layer across years, sometimes across decades, before symptoms appear. James, 63, retired and active. No significant health complaints, had never been tested for H. pylori because nobody suggested it. A routine endoscopy ordered for mild persistent bloating he had dismissed for 3 years revealed advanced gastric inflammation with premalignant changes. The infection had been present undetected for the better part of the decade. Be completely honest right now. Have you ever been tested for H. pylori? Comment yes or no below. If you are type O and the answer is no, that is the single most important conversation to have with your physician before your next checkup. The fix. Ask your doctor for an H. pylori breath test or stool antigen test. Inexpensive, non-invasive, and for type O individuals, it is foundational, not optional. Limit NSAIDs unless medically required because ibuprofen and aspirin irritate stomach lining that is already more accessible to bacterial colonization in your type. Add fermented foods 2 to 3 times per week, kefir, kimchi, sauerkraut to actively support your gut microbiome. And move every day. Type O carries the highest baseline dopamine and noradrenaline activity of any blood type. 30 minutes of walking daily does more for your long-term metabolic health than most supplements combined. Type O, the strongest cardiovascular protection on the planet, and a gut that requires consistent active defense. Honor both. Now, the next blood type carries a risk that builds silently in the arteries every single day, and most people with this type never connect it to the one variable they could actually control. Blood type A, powerful immunity, and a cardiovascular system that runs hotter than it should. Type A blood has statistically higher coagulation activity, stickier platelets, more active clotting factors. A major analysis published in the journal Circulation found that type A individuals carry a 23% higher risk of heart attack compared to type O. That is a structural vulnerability built into your biology. And there is a second layer that makes this significantly more urgent. Type A runs the highest baseline cortisol level of all blood types. In short bursts, cortisol sharpens focus and mobilizes energy. But chronically elevated, running high day after day, year after year, it inflames arterial walls, disrupts sleep, impairs insulin sensitivity, and accelerates vascular aging. Here is the mechanism that matters. Cortisol directly damages the endothelium, the thin inner lining of your blood vessels. Imagine the inner surface of a garden hose that has been left under continuous high pressure for too long. The lining cracks, loses elasticity, roughens. When your platelets are already stickier than average, those damaged vessel walls become the exact surface those platelets cling to. That combination, chronically elevated cortisol on top of higher coagulation activity, is precisely what makes type A cardiovascular risk so addressable. Both variables respond directly to deliberate lifestyle choices. Most type A individuals never realize that stress management is not a soft wellness habit. For their biology, it is direct cardiovascular intervention. David, 54, healthy weight, non-smoker, genuinely active. His cardiac event came on a Wednesday morning after 6 brutal weeks of work deadlines and disrupted sleep. Cortisol had been running at sustained crisis levels for weeks. His platelets did exactly what they were genetically programmed to do under those conditions. Be completely honest. In the past 3 months, how many nights per week have you slept under 6 hours? comment that number. For type A, that number is a direct cardiovascular data point, not a lifestyle inconvenience. The fix: blood pressure monitoring every 6 months, not once a year. Cortisol-driven vascular pressure builds silently in type A, and catching it early is the entire game. Build a daily cortisol reset, 10 minutes without screens, 4 seconds in and 6 seconds out, done every single morning without exception. 5 minutes daily outperforms 1 hour on weekends because cortisol regulation is a daily biological process. And at your next blood panel, ask your doctor to check your homocysteine, an amino acid that when elevated actively damages arterial lining. The correction is direct: folate, B12, B6, dark leafy greens, eggs, legumes. Inexpensive and targeted precisely at your genetic weak point. Type A: powerful immune response, elevated cardiac risk, high stress baseline. Treat cortisol management like your most important health metric, because for your blood type, it genuinely is. Now, the next blood type carries a hidden risk that most people and most physicians attribute to normal aging, but it is not aging. It is the immune system losing its precision, and the signal has been there for years. Blood type B, the most metabolically adaptable biology on the planet, and an immune system that when pushed past its threshold turns inward. Type B emerged approximately 15,000 years ago among nomadic populations crossing Central Asia. Constant movement, constantly shifting food environments, the immune system adapted to become the most flexible of any blood type, capable of efficiently processing animal proteins, fermented dairy, grains, and diverse plant foods without the inflammatory reactions other blood types sometimes produce. That metabolic range is your genuine biological advantage. But here's what that same flexible immune system does when the environment overwhelms its calibration. It overshoots, it loses precision, and it begins targeting the body's own tissue. Type B individuals show statistically elevated rates of autoimmune conditions. Research documents higher frequencies of type B among patients with Hashimoto's thyroiditis and certain inflammatory bowel conditions. The early signals, fatigue, joint stiffness, mild digestive irregularity, are so easily attributed to normal aging that they go uninvestigated for years. The modern food environment is for type B a calibration problem. Refined sugars, processed seed oils, ultra-processed foods deliver a constant stream of low-grade inflammatory signals that progressively distort immune precision over time. Your immune system processes these inputs differently. Act accordingly. Margaret, 61, former marathon runner. Fatigue and bilateral joint stiffness for 4 years, attributed entirely to slowing down with age. A CRP test ordered for an unrelated reason came back at 4.2 milligrams per liter, well above the threshold for low-grade chronic inflammation. Further testing revealed early Hashimoto's. Her immune system had been running hot for years. Nobody had connected it to her blood type profile or the inflammatory load of her diet. Be completely honest. Do you eat ultra-processed foods more than 4 times per week? Comment yes or no. For type B, that frequency is not just a nutrition question, it is an immune calibration question. The fix: get your C-reactive protein checked annually. A consistent CRP above 1 mg per liter without a clear infection cause means your immune system is running hot. Find the trigger with your physician. Reduce processed foods as genetic instruction, not generic advice. Rotate your food sources widely. Salmon 1 week, lentils the next, eggs and yogurt the following. For exercise, moderate, sustained movement works best. Cycling, swimming, hiking. High-intensity training without adequate recovery tends to spike inflammatory markers in type B more sharply than in other blood types. More is not always better. Consistent and recovered is better. Type B, the most adaptable metabolism of any blood type, keep the immune system calibrated and it protects you brilliantly. Now the final blood type. And this one carries the most urgent, most specifically documented warning for anyone watching this over 50. Blood type AB, the youngest blood type in human history, appearing approximately 1,000 years ago, and the one that carries the most urgent warning for cognitive health. AB inherited immune tolerance from both A and B. It produces fewer inflammatory immune reactions to foreign cells, which translates to measurably lower risk of certain gastric cancers. That immune tolerance is genuinely protective, but the coagulation profile that came with it creates a risk that researchers at Harvard Medical School and the University of Vermont documented in a study published in the journal Neurology following 30,239 participants over an average of 14 years. Type AB individuals carry an 82% higher risk of cognitive impairment, including memory loss and dementia, compared to all other blood types combined. 82%. Let that number sit for a moment. The mechanism is cerebral microcirculation. Type AB's coagulation profile creates subtle cumulative changes in blood flow through the brain's smallest vessels. over decades. Not large dramatic blockages, micro changes happening silently in vessels smaller than a human hair, building year after year in the regions responsible for memory and executive function. Think of it like a river delta with slowly silting channels. No single moment of crisis, just a gradual narrowing invisible on the surface, profoundly consequential at the cellular level. A separate analysis published in Blood, the Journal of the American Society of Hematology, confirmed that AB individuals carry significantly elevated von Willebrand factor and factor VIII activity compared to type O, directly linking the coagulation profile to the cerebrovascular risk mechanism. Thomas, 67, sharp, professionally active, no family history of dementia. Word retrieval difficulties began around age 63, longer processing time in complex situations. Annual checkups showed nothing alarming. A neurological evaluation at 66 confirmed early-stage vascular cognitive impairment. The cerebrovascular changes had been building quietly for years. Nobody had ever asked about his blood type in a cognitive context. Be completely honest. How many nights per week do you consistently sleep 7 hours or more? Comment that number. For type AB, this is not a wellness preference. It is your primary cognitive defense mechanism, and I will explain precisely why. The fix treat cardiovascular health and brain health as the same thing. Because for type AB, they are blood pressure control, blood sugar regulation, and omega-3 fatty acids are not just heart strategies, they are your cognitive protection protocol. Prioritize DHA specifically. A 2022 review in the Journal of Alzheimer's Disease confirmed that higher circulating DHA levels are associated with significantly reduced progression of white matter lesions, the primary imaging marker of small vessel cerebrovascular disease. 2 servings of fatty fish per week, salmon, mackerel, sardines, or a quality supplement providing at least 1,000 milligrams of DHA daily. Sleep 7 to 8 hours every night without exception. During deep sleep, your brain's lymphatic system activates and clears amyloid plaques, the protein deposits associated with Alzheimer's disease. When you sleep under 6 hours, that clearance is not complete. For type AB, that accumulation compounds faster. And challenge your brain deliberately. A new language, a musical instrument, complex analytical reading, cognitive reserve is biologically real. Neural redundancy built through genuine intellectual challenge compensates for the subtle circulation changes your blood type may create over time. Type AB, remarkable immune tolerance, and a brain that requires active, intentional defense, starting now, not at 70. Now, stop. I need you to hear this next part carefully, because this is where most health content completely fails you. Everything I have shared today is statistically real. It comes from large, peer-reviewed, long-term population studies. But here's what those same studies also show. For at least half of all people, blood type alone predicts almost nothing about individual outcome. Genetics loads the gun, habits pull the trigger. I have seen type A individuals with immaculate cardiovascular health in their 70s because they walked every day, managed stress consistently, slept 7 hours, and ate with intention. Their stickier platelets never became a clinical problem. I have seen type O individuals with severe gastric disease because they spent 30 years ignoring every signal their body gave them. And I have seen type AB individuals in their 70s with sharper cognitive function than people 15 years younger. Not because their genetics were different, but because they treated their blood type as a roadmap, not a verdict. The biological risk was still real for all of them. They simply chose to address it systematically long before it became a crisis. Here is what you now understand that most people have never been told. Your blood type shapes your coagulation activity, your cortisol baseline, and your pathogen vulnerability in ways that persist regardless of general healthy habits, unless those habits are specifically targeted at your type. Standard advice is written for a statistical average. You are not a statistical average. You are a specific biological system that operates according to its own blueprint. You are no longer a passive recipient of generic protocols. You are an informed person who can ask better questions, notice different signals, and have a different kind of conversation with your physician. That is not a small thing. Let me give you specific steps you can take starting tonight. First, confirm your complete blood type, including your RH factor. The RH positive or negative status carries its own immune profile implications. If you do not know it, a standard blood type test is available at any medical laboratory. Second, if you are type O and have never been tested for H. pylori, write it down right now and put it in your wallet for your next doctor's visit. That single test could identify an infection building silently for years. Third, if you are type A, set a 10-minute timer tomorrow morning. No phone. 4 seconds in, 6 seconds out. Commit to 30 consecutive days without without exception. Cortisol management is a daily biological practice, not a periodic event. Fourth, if you are type B, count how many ultra-processed meals you had this week. That is your starting number. Reduce it by one next week. That is how recalibration begins. One fewer input at a time. Fifth, if you are type AB, tonight set a sleep alarm 30 minutes earlier than usual, 1 wake of 7+ hours, track how your mental clarity changes. The data will be self-evident. Sixth, ask your physician to add CRP and homocysteine to your next standard blood panel. Both are inexpensive markers that most people never get checked, and both are directly relevant to the mechanisms we discussed today. And finally, have an informed conversation with your doctor. Not just a checkup, a real conversation. Bring your blood type. Ask specifically, given my blood type profile, which of my current risk factors interact with my coagulation activity or stress hormone baseline? You deserve a physician who treats you as a thinking adult. Drop a comment right now saying mapped. If this gave you something real today, if it answered questions you have been sitting with about your own health patterns, I want to see that word. It tells me you are ready to stop following advice written for someone else's biology. Think of one person you care about who has never heard any of this, someone who follows their generic annual checkup and wonders why they still feel like something is quietly wrong. Send them this video right now, not later. That single action might be the most important health conversation you start this year. Subscribe to this channel. My mission is straightforward, honest, research-grounded health information that gives you something real to do before something goes wrong, not after. In my next video, I am going to cover the 3 most commonly missed root causes of persistent fatigue in adults over 50. The third one surprises almost everyone because it looks exactly like normal aging on a standard blood panel, and it is entirely correctable. You will not want to miss it. This video is for educational and informational purposes only and is not intended as medical advice. Health management must be individualized based on your complete medical history, current health status, and all relevant clinical factors. Never adjust or discontinue any medication or treatment without first consulting your healthcare provider. The information presented reflects published research and should not replace evaluation by a qualified medical professional.